I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but here I am, sharing a story that I'd never imagined I'd be telling. My name is Jason, and I was married to a woman named Claire for 7 years. On the surface, we seemed to have a perfect life, a cozy home in the suburbs, two adorable kids, and a seemingly solid marriage. I was the dependable husband and father, while Claire was the energetic and beautiful wife everyone adored. But beneath that shiny surface, cracks were starting to form, and I was blissfully unaware of how deep those cracks ran. It all began a few months ago. At first, I noticed subtle changes in Claire's behavior. She started working late more often at her job as a marketing manager, which, to be honest, was a bit odd because she had always been very dedicated to family time. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just swamped with projects. She also became more secretive about her phone, often texting when I was around but quickly putting it away whenever I approached. I thought maybe I was just paranoid, overthinking things in a way that men sometimes do. One day, I came home from work a bit early and found Claire's phone buzzing on the kitchen table. I don't usually snoop, but I felt an uncontrollable urge to glance at the screen. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. A text from my assistant, Mark. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll take care of everything just like we planned." My heart raced so fast it felt like it might explode. I knew I had to confront her, but part of me wanted to gather more information first. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't concentrate at work, replaying that text over and over in my mind. I started observing Claire more closely, looking for clues. I noticed the way she giggled when she got a text or how she would get dressed up for girls' night out more frequently than usual. It didn't take long before I had enough evidence stacked against her. I found a receipt for a hotel stay that she claimed was for a work conference. The name on the receipt wasn't her company but rather a romantic getaway spot. The confrontation was inevitable. I remember the night clearly. It was tense and emotional. I waited until the kids were asleep, and as soon as Claire walked in, I looked her straight in the eye and asked, "What's going on with you and Mark?" Her reaction was shock, but it quickly morphed into anger. "How dare you invade my privacy?" she shouted, trying to deflect, but I didn't let her dodge the issue. "I saw the texts, Claire. I know about the hotel." Her response was a mix of lies and feigned innocence. "It was just a business meeting. You're overreacting," she insisted. I couldn't believe my ears. That night turned into a whirlwind of accusations, tears, and a lot of blame. I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster, heart pounding in my chest and anger boiling inside me. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt a wave of emotions crash over me: shock, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. This was the woman I thought I knew, yet here she was, so caught up in a lie that she couldn't even look me in the eye. I was angry, but I was also deeply saddened. How could she do this? In that moment, I realized that our marriage was built on a foundation I could no longer trust. The woman I had loved so dearly was now an enigma, someone who I couldn't recognize. I was faced with a choice. I could either try to salvage what was left of our relationship, or I could take a stand and fight for my own happiness. I spent the weekend brooding over everything, trying to make sense of my emotions. It felt like my world had been flipped upside down, and the future I envisioned was slipping away. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would lead me to a place I never expected. The betrayal cut deep, but it also ignited a fire within me, one that would lead me to make decisions I'd never thought I would. I was done being the passive husband. I was ready to take control of my life. The following days after the confrontation were a blur of anger, hurt, and a sense of disillusionment. Claire had returned to her usual routine, pretending as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I felt like I was walking around in a fog, trapped in a reality that felt increasingly suffocating. It was as if I was living in two worlds, the one where we were a happy couple, and the one where my wife betrayed me in the most painful way possible. I kept replaying that night in my head, dissecting every word, every look. Claire was skilled at manipulation. She'd always been good at sidestepping issues. I was still reeling from her lies, the excuses she made. Just a business meeting had morphed into a mantra in my mind, and it no longer felt like a valid explanation. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. I didn't want to keep pretending that everything was fine. One afternoon at work, while I was sitting at my desk, I was struck by a sudden thought. Why was I even putting up with this? I had spent years being the reliable husband and father, but where had that got me? I remembered the day I hired Mark as my assistant. He was enthusiastic, ambitious, and eager to learn. I had seen potential in him, but now he felt like a traitor. It was time to turn the tables. I started plotting my revenge, not in a way that was malicious, but rather as a means of reclaiming my life. I decided to take charge of my career to prove to both Claire and myself that I could thrive without her. I had been stuck in my role at work for too long. Now was my time to shine. I began to work late, just as Claire had been doing, but instead of sneaking around, I was focused, determined to show my worth. As I immersed myself in my work, my productivity soared. I began to take on more responsibility, volunteering for challenging projects that I had previously shied away from. I spent nights drafting proposals for new initiatives and ways to increase team efficiency. I even started networking more, reaching out to colleagues and higher-ups. To my surprise, my efforts did not go unnoticed. My boss, Laura, approached me one day and commended me for my dedication. "You're really stepping up, Jason. I see a lot of potential in you," she said, and her words filled me with renewed energy. A week later, Laura called for a meeting. I walked in, heart racing but confident. To my astonishment, she offered me a promotion. "We need someone with your vision to lead the upcoming project. I believe you're ready for this," she said, her eyes bright with encouragement. It felt surreal, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I accepted the position on the spot, ready to embrace this new chapter of my life. Meanwhile, Claire's behavior became even more erratic. With me working longer hours and focusing on my career, she couldn't hide the guilt that was blossoming beneath her surface. I noticed her becoming more defensive, and I could see her trying to keep up appearances. She'd put on her best smile when I came home, but her eyes told a different story. The woman who once seemed so confident was now anxious, almost frantic. As I thrived at work, I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't experienced in years. I was reclaiming my life, brick by brick. I had no time to dwell on my failing marriage. I was too busy making strides in my career. I began to see a glimmer of who I used to be, ambitious, driven, and ready to take on the world. I didn't want to leave Claire just yet. I wanted to confront her again, this time with the knowledge of my success. I wanted to show her that I wouldn't be the man she could manipulate anymore. I had transformed into someone she wouldn't recognize. The thought of seeing her squirm as I thrived was a source of motivation for me. I was ready to take back control, not just of my career, but of my entire life. The day finally came when I decided to confront Claire again. I had been promoted, my confidence soaring, and I wanted to lay everything out on the table. I wanted to show her that I was done being the passive husband who sat back and let her dictate our reality. The night I chose for the confrontation started like any other. The kids were tucked in, and Claire sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, probably texting Mark or someone else. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room. "We need to talk," I said, and her expression shifted instantly. Her smile faltered, and I could see the panic rise in her eyes. "Jason, I really don't think now is a good time," she stammered, but I was already done with her excuses. I laid it all out. For her, my promotion, the projects I was leading, and my determination to no longer be the man she could walk all over. "You think I'm oblivious. You think I'll just sit back and let you cheat on me while I wallow in self-pity." I pushed further, the words spilling out with a fervor I didn't know I had. Claire's attempts to defend herself crumbled as I revealed how I'd caught on to her lies. The look on her face was a mix of disbelief and fear. I could see that she was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that I wouldn't be the same man anymore. In that moment, I felt a shift within myself. The power dynamics were changing, and for the first time in a long time, I was the one in control. It was liberating, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. I was on a path to reclaim my life, and I wouldn't stop until I had dismantled the illusion she had built around our marriage. I was ready for whatever was next, and I knew that my journey toward emotional healing was just getting started. The confrontation with Claire left me. feeling energized and resolute. I had taken a stand and it felt good. I was no longer the passive partner in our relationship, and that feeling of empowerment extended beyond just my work life. It permeated every aspect of my being. As I settled into my new role at work, the thrill of success pushed me forward. I was meeting new colleagues, attending important meetings, and receiving recognition for my hard work. It was as if a curtain had been lifted, and I was finally able to see clearly. But with every step I took toward my career goals, Claire's true self began to emerge more vividly. She was no longer able to maintain the facade of a perfect wife, and the cracks in her armor were growing wider with each passing day. I noticed her becoming increasingly anxious and defensive, perhaps fearing the consequences of her actions would come crashing down. It was as if she was slowly being stripped of the power she had come to rely on. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, Claire strolled into the kitchen and tried to make small talk. Her tone was light, but I could sense the tension simmering beneath the surface. "How was work today?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I could tell she was fishing for information, trying to gauge how I viewed her now. "It was productive," I responded, keeping my tone neutral. I didn't want to give her too much. She had already taken enough from me. "I'm leading the marketing strategy meeting next week." I watched her expression shift from feigned interest to something resembling dread. If I had any doubt about her guilt before, it was all but erased at that moment. "I see," she said hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're really moving up, huh?" "Yeah, I am," I replied, the newfound confidence in my tone undeniable. "Things are changing, Claire, and I'm not the same guy I was a few months ago." I could see her stiffen, the reality of my transformation settling in. She was losing control over the narrative we had spun together. As days turned into weeks, I began implementing small changes in our home. I started taking charge of the household responsibilities, delegating chores, and managing the kids' schedules with an assertiveness I hadn't had before. I felt free, liberated from the chains of complacency that had bound me for years. I also started spending time with my friends again, friends I had neglected while trying to keep the peace in my marriage. One Friday, I decided to invite a few friends over for a game night. I hadn't done that in ages, and the prospect of laughter and camaraderie excited me. I sent out texts to a group of guys I used to hang out with often, and within hours I had a solid crew lined up. When the night arrived, the atmosphere was electric. We played games, shared stories, and laughed like we were young again. I felt like I was rediscovering parts of myself that I thought I had lost. The joy of being surrounded by friends was a stark contrast to the turmoil at home. Claire, on the other hand, was not pleased. She had returned home earlier than expected and walked in on our little party. The look on her face was one of sheer shock mixed with anger. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. I could see the tension radiating from her body as she tried to take control of the situation. "Just a game night, Claire. Why don't you join us?" I offered, hoping to diffuse her anger. She scoffed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You just throw these parties while I'm at home and expect me to just accept it." "It's not just about you anymore," I said, feeling the confidence surge within me. "I'm taking back my life. If you want to sit around sulking and hiding from reality, that's your choice. I'm moving forward." The words hung in the air, and for a moment I could see a flicker of realization in her eyes. Maybe it was the first time she understood the gravity of her situation. She was losing me, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. After that night, things started to spiral for Claire. She became increasingly desperate in her attempts to regain control. One evening, I returned home later than usual after a work event and found her waiting for me in the living room. She was visibly upset, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy as if she had been crying. "Jason, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. "About what?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "I want us to work on our marriage. I realize how much I've messed up, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this," she pleaded, her words starting to tumble out in a panic. I felt a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, but also a strange sense of vindication. Claire was finally acknowledging the mess she had created, but I wasn't ready to jump back into the same cycle. You have no idea what I've been through, Claire, and how hard I've worked to find myself again. I can't just forget what you did. You made your choices. I'm just living with the consequences." Her face fell, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. "I can change, I swear. Just give me a chance." "I don't know if I can trust you anymore," I replied, feeling the weight of every heart-wrenching moment we had shared. "You've broken that trust, and you can't just expect it to come back because you're feeling guilty now." The conversation ended in a stalemate, with Claire retreating to our bedroom, and I was left standing there, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I had finally stood my ground, but it had come at a cost. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a profound sense of clarity wash over me. I was no longer the man who would let infidelity define my life. I was moving forward, focusing on my career, my kids, and my own happiness. The anger and sadness from Claire's betrayal were still fresh, but I could feel a shift within me, an acceptance that I was capable of thriving, even in this chaos. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that this journey was about more than just revenge. It was about self-discovery and reclaiming my worth. I had learned that the path to moving on isn't always a straight line, and sometimes it requires confronting the people we once loved, even when it's painful. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever came next. The strain in our marriage continued to simmer like a pot on the verge of boiling over. Claire's pleas for reconciliation tugged at my heart, but the bitterness of her betrayal lingered like an unwelcome guest. The promises she made seemed insincere, and every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the shattered trust between us. It was a heavy weight to carry, and I often found solace in my work and my newfound friendships, both of which had become my refuge in this storm. As I settled into my new role, my colleagues began to notice the change in me. They remarked on my newfound confidence and energy. I was thriving, and it felt incredible. I was leading meetings, driving initiatives, and being recognized for my contributions. I felt like a different person, one who wasn't defined by my marital issues, but rather someone who was capable of achieving greatness on his own. But Claire was still there, lurking in the shadows of our home, her presence a constant reminder of my pain. She tried to reach out, offering apologies and initiating conversations about us. Each time she approached me, I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I wanted to see genuine remorse, not just a desperate attempt to patch things up. One evening, I returned home from work to find Claire sitting at the dining table, a pile of paperwork in front of her. "Jason, can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the tension within her. "What is it?" I asked, feeling my defenses rise. "I've been thinking a lot about us, and I realize how much I need to earn back your trust. I want to go to couples therapy," she suggested, her tone earnest. The idea caught me off guard. Couples therapy. Wasn't that what people used when they truly wanted to work on their relationship? Did she really want to fix things, or was this another tactic to keep me from moving on? "Why now?" I questioned, crossing my arms. "Why not when you were in the middle of your affair?" Claire shifted uncomfortably, but I could see the sincerity in her eyes. "I was scared, Jason. I didn't know how to admit I was unhappy. I thought I could just keep things together without addressing the problems, but I see now that I messed up. I want to fix this." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to agree. Maybe therapy could help us salvage something from this wreckage. But the other part of me was screaming that I shouldn't have to put further effort into a relationship that had taken so much from me already. "I need time to think about it, Claire," I finally replied, my voice measured but firm. The following weeks involved a delicate dance of avoidance and tension. I buried myself in work, taking on additional responsibilities and projects. My boss, Laura, continued to recognize my efforts, and I could see my career flourishing. I had become a rising star in the company, and it felt good to be acknowledged for my hard work. However, amidst my career success, Claire's presence was a constant reminder of my turmoil. She would often try to engage me in discussions, asking about my day at work or how the kids were doing. I answered her questions, but our conversations felt hollow. I was still grappling with my feelings, and no amount of small talk could bridge the gap that had formed between us. Then came the day that pushed me closer to a breaking point. I returned home one evening to find Claire in the living room, her expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "I made an appointment for us to see a therapist," she said, my heart sinking as I heard the words. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, frustration, anger, and a hint of despair. "You can't just decide that for both of us, Claire. I'm not ready to jump into therapy when I don't even know if I want this marriage anymore," I snapped, my voice rising. "Please just give it a chance," she pleaded, her eyes welling with tears. "I can't lose you, Jason. I'm willing to do the work to fix this." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but the thought of subjecting myself to therapy with her filled me with dread. Did I want to reopen those wounds? I thought about my growth over the past few months, my journey towards self-discovery and empowerment. I had found a sense of purpose outside of my marriage, something I never thought I could reclaim. "Maybe we need to rethink what we want," I replied, my voice softer. "I'm not sure if I can trust you enough to go to therapy. It feels like a step backward for me." Claire hung her head, and I could see the weight of my words hitting her hard. "I understand," she said quietly. "I just want you back in my life, Jason. I want to make things right." As I stood there watching her struggles, I felt the tide of emotion surge again, anger, sadness, but also a hint of empathy. I realized how broken she truly was, and while I had every right to be angry, part of me still cared about the person I had once loved. "Look, I need time," I said finally. "Let's take a step back and really evaluate what we want. I'm not ready for therapy, but I'll think about it." With that, I turned to leave, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I had put up a boundary, but I also knew that it came at a cost. I was torn between wanting to heal and needing to protect myself. As I walked away, I could feel the tension lingering in the air, and I knew that we were at a critical juncture. It became apparent that moving forward wouldn't be easy. Claire's actions had shattered our marriage, and while she was willing to work on it, I was still grappling with my own feelings. I had learned to stand up for myself, to reclaim my life, and I was determined not to lose that newfound strength. As the days passed, I continued to focus on my career and my personal growth. My life was finally beginning to feel fulfilling, and while Claire's presence still loomed over me, I knew that I had the power to decide my own future. The question was, what did I truly want? In the coming weeks, I would have to confront not only my feelings for Claire, but also my vision for my life moving forward. The winds of change were blowing, and I was ready to see where they would lead me. As I continued to navigate the complexities of my marriage with Claire, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I had carved out a new identity for myself, one marked by ambition, confidence, and a renewed sense of purpose. Yet, Claire's presence weighed heavily on my mind. Despite her attempts to mend what was broken, I couldn't shake the feeling that our foundation had been irrevocably damaged. One evening, while I was sitting at my desk, I received a text from Laura, my boss. She had invited me to an upcoming networking event that she believed would be beneficial for my career. As I read her message, I felt a rush of excitement. This was a chance to connect with influential people in the industry, to further solidify my position as a rising star. Claire walked into the room as I was typing my response. "Who are you texting?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "Just Laura. She invited me to a networking event next week," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh, that sounds great, you should go," Claire offered, her enthusiasm feeling a bit forced. "Yeah, I plan to," I said, keeping my focus on my phone. I knew that this was an opportunity for me to continue moving forward, and I wanted to keep Claire at arm's length from my progress. That weekend, I spent hours preparing for the event, selecting the perfect outfit and rehearsing my talking points. I was excited to mingle with successful professionals and showcase my skills. As the day approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. This was my moment to shine, and I was determined to make the most of it. The night of the event arrived, and as I walked into the venue, I was struck by the atmosphere, buzzing with energy, filled with bright lights and lively conversations. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I belonged here. I was ready to connect and learn from others. As I navigated the crowd, I struck up conversations with various professionals, sharing stories about my recent projects and exchanging advice. I felt invigorated, surrounded by like-minded individuals who were just as passionate about their careers as I was. It was a stark contrast to the tension I felt at home with Claire. Halfway through the night, I bumped into an acquaintance from my past, Sarah, a fellow marketer I hadn't seen in years. We chatted about our careers, and I couldn't help but notice the chemistry between us. Sarah was charming, intelligent, and had a spark that reminded me of the excitement I once felt when I first started in my career. As the evening progressed, we shared laughs and exchanged contact information, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could find happiness outside of my troubled marriage. When I returned home late that night, Claire was waiting for me. "How was it?" she asked, a hint of anxiety in her voice. "It was great. I met some interesting people," I replied, trying to keep my tone light and casual. "Anyone special?" she pressed, her gaze sharp. "Just colleagues," I responded, not willing to divulge the details of my interaction with Sarah. I could see the tension in Claire's body language, and I knew she was still grappling with the fear of losing me. Over the next few days, I found myself reflecting on my encounter with Sarah. The connection we had felt refreshing, and it got me thinking about what I truly wanted. I realized that I had been so focused on healing from Claire's betrayal that I hadn't taken the time to consider my own needs and desires. Meanwhile, Claire continued to make efforts to reach out to me. She began suggesting activities we could do as a family, trying to rekindle the connection we once had. While part of me appreciated her efforts, another part felt overwhelmed. It was as if she was trying to fill a void that couldn't be bridged so easily. One evening, I found myself sitting in our living room with Claire. She was talking excitedly about a family trip she wanted to plan, but I felt detached. I was still wrestling with my emotions and trying to come to terms with what had happened between us. "Claire, I think we need to have a serious talk," I said, interrupting her. Her expression shifted from excitement to concern. "What is it?" "I've been thinking a lot about us and where we stand. I know you want to make things work, but I'm not sure if I can go back to how things were," I confessed, my heart racing. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I feel like we're stuck in this loop of trying to fix something that may be too broken to repair. I don't know if therapy will help us, and I don't want to waste your time or mine if we're not on the same page," I said, struggling to find the right words. Claire looked down, her shoulders slumping as if I had physically deflated her. "I just want to show you how much I care," she said quietly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know you do, but love isn't enough if the trust isn't there. I need to think about my own happiness too," I replied, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. In that moment, I recognized that both Claire and I were at a crossroads, but we were heading in different directions. I had grown stronger and more independent, while she seemed to be clinging desperately to a relationship that had become toxic. The following days were filled with uncertainty. I found myself contemplating my own desires and goals, while Claire continued to reach out, trying to make amends. I felt the pressure mounting, knowing that a decision had to be made. I began to realize that I had the power to choose my own path. I could continue to stay in a situation where I felt trapped or embrace the unknown and explore the possibilities that lay ahead. The thought of finding happiness outside of my marriage excited me, but it also filled me with fear. I knew I had to make a choice that was best for me. I had worked too hard to reclaim my life, and while it was painful to confront the reality of my marriage, I knew I had to be honest with myself. The conversation ahead would be difficult but necessary. It was time to face the truth and decide whether I wanted to move forward with Claire or forge a new path entirely. The winds of change were blowing strong, and I was ready to see where they would lead me next. The days turned into a whirlwind of emotions leading up to the pivotal conversation I knew I had to have with Claire. I could feel the gravity of my decision pressing down on me, weighing heavily on my heart. I had taken the time to reflect on what I wanted, and deep down, I realized that clinging to a relationship that had become increasingly toxic was holding me back from discovering my true self. One Saturday afternoon, I sat Claire down in the living room, the sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the space. I took a deep breath, my stomach twisting with anxiety. "Claire, we need to talk about our future," I began, my voice steady but soft. She looked at me with a mix of hope and apprehension. "What's on your mind?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about our marriage," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I know you want to work on things, but I don't think I can. I've realized that I can't just forget what happened. The trust is gone, and I don't believe we can rebuild it." Claire's face fell, and I could see the realization wash over her. "You're saying you want to end our marriage?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's what's best for both of us," I replied, my heart aching at the sight of her pain. "I've spent so long trying to fight for something that might not be salvageable. I need to put myself first, and I think you deserve the chance to find someone who can be fully committed to you without the baggage of our past." Tears streamed down Claire's cheeks. "I never intended for things to end up like this, Jason. I'm so sorry for what I did. I thought we could recover from it. I know you're sorry. And I appreciate that you're trying, but I can't pretend that everything is okay. I've changed over the past few months, and I've realized that I want more from life than what we have," I said firmly, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. The silence that followed felt like an eternity, her sobs echoing in the room as I struggled to keep my own emotions in check. I knew this was going to hurt her, but I also knew it was the right choice for both of us. I wanted her to be happy, and I wanted that for myself too. "Please don't hate me," Claire whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you, I just didn't know how to communicate what I was feeling." "I don't hate you, Claire. I just can't be in this relationship anymore. It's not healthy for either of us," I replied, my heart breaking as I saw the woman I once loved crumble before me. "I hope you can find happiness in the future, and I sincerely wish you the best." With that, I stood, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. It was a bittersweet moment, one where I felt the chains of my past finally begin to loosen. I had taken control of my life, and while it was painful to let go, I knew it was the right decision. The following weeks involved more conversations about logistics, dividing assets, figuring out co-parenting arrangements for our children. It was challenging, but I approached it with a sense of determination, always keeping our children's well-being at the forefront of my mind. I wanted to ensure that, despite the changes, they wouldn't suffer from our decisions. As I embraced my newfound freedom, I also started to explore the connection I had with Sarah from the networking event. We began talking more frequently, and I found myself drawn to her charm and enthusiasm. She was supportive and understanding, and I appreciated how effortlessly we could communicate. It felt good to connect with someone without the heavy baggage of mistrust. One afternoon, while having coffee with Sarah, I realized just how far I had come. I was no longer the man defined by his wife's infidelity. I was emerging as someone who had taken charge of his life. I felt light, almost euphoric, as I shared my journey with her, recounting the challenges I had faced and how liberating it was to finally break free. "This is only the beginning for you, Jason," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "You're on the path to finding your happiness, and that's something worth celebrating." Her words resonated deeply with me. I had survived the storm, and now I was ready to embrace the sunshine that followed. I learned that healing takes time, and it's okay to feel vulnerable. But more importantly, I discovered that self-worth and happiness come from within. As I continued to navigate my new life, I took the lessons from my marriage to heart. I learned that communication is vital, that trust is fragile, and that sometimes love alone isn't enough to hold a relationship together. I realized the importance of knowing my worth and setting boundaries that align with my values. While the journey was not without its challenges, I felt empowered to face whatever the future held. I was ready to create the life I envisioned for myself, one filled with love, happiness, and fulfillment. I knew that, regardless of the past, I had the strength to forge my own path, and I was excited to see where it would lead me. The winds of change had carried me to a new beginning, and I was finally ready to embrace it.